After my personal struggle with food left me sick and suicidal, I was struck with the realization that food alone can't fix us. So I set out to discover what could, and what I found changed everything. After coaching thousands of clients and interviewing the world's leading experts, I realized it was time to start a bigger conversation. What are you really hungry for?
It's great.
Ooh, good one.
What am I really hungry for?
I love that question.
It's time to discover what you're really hungry for. Where does love come from? What creates love? In Pema Chodron's book, Taking the Leap, she talks about a Jewish family, Michael and Julie Weiser, that began receiving threatening calls from a member of the local Ku Klux Klan. They were told by the police that these calls were likely coming from the head of the KKK, Larry Trapp, a man who had a reputation of being filled with hatred. They found out that Larry was in a wheelchair due to a beating he had suffered many years ago. Larry would call often and threaten to kill them, their friends, and their family, and to destroy their property. During one of these calls, Michael Weiser decided to try something a little bit different. When he could get a word in between Larry's threats, he offered to give Larry a ride to the grocery store, since Michael knew that Larry had a hard time getting around in the wheelchair. Larry didn't speak for a moment, and then the anger left his voice. He said he had someone who helped him with that, but thanked him for asking. But the Weisers really wanted to help Larry, so they began to call him. They started offering him help regularly. One day when they came for a visit, Larry took off his Nazi ring and gave it to the Weisers. With this one gesture, he broke his association with the KKK. He told the Weisers that he denounced what the KKK stood for, and he acknowledged that he didn't hate them because that would mean that he was still a racist. Rather than turning to another prejudice, Larry opened up his mind to love. The Weisers offered Larry love, and not the kind of love that you see in the movies, but the kind of love that happens every single day that can change someone's life. The kind of love that truly transforms people. When you begin to fall in love, there's a glow and it feels like anything is possible. Life has begun, but we need to be able to find that glow and that feeling of possibility within ourselves and share it with others, even when it's the most difficult. We need to be able to go outside of ourselves and be the love that we want to see in the world, just like the Weisers. See, it's easy to be loving when people are loving back. It's easy to feel love when people love you. But what about the times when things are hard, when things aren't so easy? We don't want to be trapped in the cycle of being addicted to love because it feels good. When this is the case, we just bounce from relationship to relationship, trying to maintain that high of falling in love. But a whole different thing happens when we can go out into the world and be loving regardless of how other people treat us or how other people are showing up in the world. When we can embody this kind of love, we can turn the world around, just like the Weisers did for Larry Trapp. Creating more love in your life is about embodying love every single day. This week's guest, JJ Flizanes, is the author of Fit to Love, How to Get Physically, Emotionally, and Spiritually Fit to Attract the Love of Your Life. She specializes in the idea that fitness isn't just about your body and what kind of physical shape you're in. Fitness is about the invisible areas of your life that determine your well-being, such as your emotional, mental, and spiritual health. So, JJ, how can we start to be the love that we want to receive in the world?
Well, we start off by treating ourselves the way that we want others to treat us. So I wrote the book Fit to Love, How to Get Physically, Emotionally, and Spiritually Fit to Attract the Love of Your Life. And really the whole point of the book, the love of your life really needs to start with you. You have to be the love of your life. So people ask, well, how do I do that? What does self-love mean? I'm sure you've probably heard that before. Self-care, self-love. I don't know how to do that. And it starts with everything from our self-talk. How do we wake up in the morning and look at ourselves and what do we say? So many people beat themselves up when they get up in the morning. They think about what they aren't, what they didn't do, what they have to do, that they need to better themselves, versus getting up and having a different attitude of that I am breathing and that I feel good and my intention is to feel good and did I do a great job yesterday, and to be that kind, loving person that you really seek out from somebody else. Who doesn't want a compliment from somebody? So compliment yourself. I mean, that's really the first place to start. And then every other aspect of life needs to have that point of view of when you exercise. So fit to love. It's like, how does that go together? Well, I'm sure you've experienced in the gym or people working out where you can kind of feel this energy of people are exercising and they want to lose weight, but they're doing it like at a desperation. And you feel this yearning.
Painful. Right. It's such an interesting perspective for sure, and great point that you bring up. You know, we are all sweating and grunting in the gym, and we are there because we're not happy. We don't love ourselves, which brings up a great point. Like you talk about, well, love yourself first. And we get that advice a lot. And on the show, we talk about self-love a lot. But what about those people who are like, JJ, I don't love myself. I don't like anything about me, and you're asking me to love myself. Like, I think it's a great theory, right? And I actually think it's great in actuality. But how do we take someone who says, I love the idea of loving myself, I just don't? How do we get them there?
Well, you first have to start by being conscious. So we walk around with a lot of unhealed wounds all the time in different areas of life, different beliefs that don't support our well-being, beliefs that actually don't agree with us. Like, we don't feel good when we think of that because it's actually not in agreement with our higher self. Our higher self doesn't believe that negative thought about us, so there's a disconnect there. So the person that says, well, I don't know how to do that, you have to start by taking one step at a time. And the first step needs to be mindfulness and awareness and consciousness. And mindfulness is really, again, being present, being in your body, being able to be still. Being able to pay attention and listen to what you're thinking about. And to, out of our mind, we've got 12% of our mind that's conscious and 88% that's subconscious, which means we can't hear it. It's underneath the surface. It's like the basement of our mind. But that 12% that's conscious, we can start to tune into what that's saying. And when you can listen to the words that you're telling yourself, how many people do you know say, oh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? I was so stupid. Okay, that would be time out.
Yeah.
Okay, so how we can start to shift that is say, would you talk to a child that way? Would you talk to your child that way? Or someone that you really, really love? So what would you say differently to someone who you're trying to support? You'd say, oh, that's okay. You made a mistake. It's all right. You're going to learn from it. So being able to change that conversation within your own head, within the way that you deal with you. And that's really the first place to start. Mindfulness, consciousness, and awareness of your thoughts, your feelings, your body, how you hold yourself, and then your beliefs about the world in different situations.
I get that, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So we're baby stepping our way to loving ourselves. I think that it just makes so much sense. And I love that, you know, being aware of these things, when we're aware, and I feel like sometimes we are, most of the time, for the most part, we're not. You know, it's these conversations that you talked about, they go on all the time. They're constant. We're always thinking about how bad we are or how wrong we were, or how we didn't do something good enough. And it's just a track that's always running. So to interrupt that, I think, is huge. And I also think that it's important to point out that you're not going to get it every time when you first start, right? Because this is a new habit. You're just learning to be aware. But every time you are aware of that, it builds, right? And you get more successful at it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because part of what the speed at which that you were sort of referring to, that we sort of talk to ourselves and things happen, part of being mindful, part of being conscious, and part of being in your body is absolutely slowing down. We can't live at the pace that we currently live at and do any of this.
Okay, that's not a very popular statement that you're making right now, because we're all going, we're going to be late, we're going to get there, we're doing this, we're so busy, JJ, and you're telling us to slow down? And what about for people who say, you know what, JJ, I got it, but I can't stop. I must keep going. I have kids, I work, it's constant. I get up at this time, I get the kids to school, I go to work, I pick the kids up, I get home, I stop, I make something for dinner, I get something for dinner, I get the kids in the bath, I get them in the bed. How do I slow down? How, when all of this madness is happening, how do they slow down?
So in that framework, that's partly been a choice, right? So you chose that. So within that comes duties and responsibilities and action steps and things that are going to happen that you're not going to necessarily say, I'm not doing this today. So it's about taking from moment to moment, number one, that idea that you're not a victim to the circumstance. When we feel like I'm such a victim to my life because I'm so busy, everything is calling to me, well, you chose it. If you didn't choose it, then if you come at it from, I chose this, the energy of victim goes away automatically, and you all of a sudden feel a little more empowered to go, well, I chose this. Okay, so now how can I make choices within this framework that will help me to rest more, ask for help, not neglect what's going on with you emotionally?
That's really interesting because we live in a society that's filled with wanting to blame people for things. This happened, it's your fault. That was your fault. I did, you know what I mean? It's we don't want to take on that responsibility. So I think, asking us to be like, whoa, I chose that. That was all me. No, you did that. I didn't do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. How do we get past that thinking? And is that just pure stubbornness on our part?
Part of it's modeling. It's just, it's been a consciousness that we've been modeled by. I mean, think of your parents, think of your grandparents, think of how they communicated emotion.
Not very well.
Right. How much emotional manipulation happened in parenting situations and even in relationships with adults. Oh, well, you hurt my feelings, or I'm mad at you because you did that and that hurt my feelings. And that's a phrase that has been used so many times. I've heard it. I used it when I was growing up. I didn't realize what a victim position that was until I was in my 20s. And then I realized, I'd heard the words, you're the creator of your own reality. And I thought, oh. And to me, that brought energy into my body. I thought, well, then shoot, I can change this. If I don't like something, I get to change that. And even just that energetic relief that I felt, I thought, wow, okay, if I'm the creator of my own reality, if I don't like something, I get to change it. And some people interpret that and hear that in a negative way, and they think, oh, then look what a bad job I did, and they go down that path. So I know not everyone hears that the same way I did, but literally on a person to person, really what you've been taught by your parents, what's acceptable in society, what we see on television. If you're watching the news, oh my God, if you're watching the news, then of course you're going to be depressed and think that the world is, we're under attack by everything and everyone and nothing is going well.
Yeah.
Okay, shut that all off for a little while. Give yourself a break from that which is not even part of your reality if you don't choose for it to be. There are several layers to this besides just that, how I was modeled and what the society perpetuates. But on top of that is a spiritual perspective. On top of that is, depending on what you believe about what else is out there, and that's a really important thing for people to kind of dive into, actually.
You talk about the invisible well-being. Tell me about that. What is that, and why is it so important?
So my first company was Invisible Fitness, and it was a personal training company that helped people. And really the whole first start of it, I mean, it was definitely divinely inspired because I was looking at joints at the time. I was looking at the fitness industry and how a lot of trainers were not very educated on the science, the biomechanics, the anatomy of the body, the physiology of the body. And so they were just sort of routinely going through what I'm going to call gym science. And there wasn't actual real science. And so when I started Invisible Fitness, the difference between me and my trainers and other trainers were that I'm looking at what you can't see. You can do a couple exercises that are going to ruin literally your cartilage over the course of the next 5 years. And maybe in 10 or 20 years, you're going to have a lot of pain there because you won't have any more cartilage. If you change the exercise, you will actually preserve all that cartilage and you will be injury, provided you don't fall down or some other accident happen, you'll be preserving your body longer. So that's how it started, was the invisible, mostly the joints, looking at the structure. And then as I grew, as my clients had different needs and I looked at pains and they weren't going away with just the science of the body, I thought, well, what else is this? And it really became about the emotions. It became about the mindset of the body. Biochemically, it became about the food they were eating and hormones. And then just on a spiritual level, again, that lack of trust or the trust. Someone who trusts the process of life is a calmer person than someone who thinks that it's all on their shoulders. And so what you don't see, the invisible part, creates the visible. Both on a physiological level, as well as in a frequency, vibrational manifesting way. I'm sure you know people that have amazing bodies, but they're miserable. Or people that have everything looks good on the outside, but really secretly they're depressed. they're sad. And so those are all invisible energies, but they create your outcome, and they definitely hinder and or help what goes on with your body, whether it be, again, these injuries. I'd get people with like 7 injuries because nobody else knew what to do with them. And I realized after a little while of working with these people that these injuries were not just physical. These were a lot of anger, repressed emotion, just stuck stuff that wasn't going to go away. And a cry for help.
Most people, speaking of love and being this love, most people think, okay, when I have the career, I'll find love. When I'm skinny, I'll finally find love. When I'm successful in whatever, when I've done this, when I'm older, I'll finally find that love that I've been looking for. And what you're saying, it really has nothing to do with those things, and that we need to start loving ourselves now. We need to find the love now, not... And then do you believe also that when we find the love, that these other things, the success, the weight, everything else will come as well?
And so we're looking, again, outside of ourselves for someone else to give us what we already have. But we aren't willing to give it to ourselves. We want someone else to give it to us, again, which is dependent and victim. And it's like having a bucket with a hole in it. You have to patch the hole up before the water's going to stay in it. Otherwise, it's going to keep flowing out of it.
Yeah. And I like that you made the point of, other people. Like, we wait for other people to love us. We want them to. We need them to. I think that's a key point. We need them to love us. And that's not really love. That's just codependency. It's not love.
Right.
So we seek something outside of ourselves. I think that's a really, really great point. I wonder, we're talking about loving yourself first, right? And we know that sometimes that's not an easy thing to do. What if just being that love that you so desperately want, being that love in the world, if you can't love yourself, what if, JJ, we just tried to love others? What if we just put love out there?
So if we could focus on something that brings us love, that's enough to get started. Because then once we practice feeling that love, it's going to get easier to look at yourself. Right. Now, what's going to be interesting is that when people try to, and that's why it's a big leap, they look at themselves, and if they have no love for themselves, it's really hard to make that jump. And so they go, oh no, I can't do this. If you start practicing on something like the flowers, or a dog, or a cat, or a child, or another person, or your parents, or a thing, or this lovely, beautiful purple chair, or or that beautiful house, and if you just really get into that feeling, and then you can keep it going, and then when you look at yourself, you're looking at yourself from a higher frequency. You're now going to start seeing things differently because you're vibrating at a higher level, and you're going to start noticing. It might not fix it immediately, but as long as you stay up there, now when you turn the focus back onto yourself, you may say less negative things. You may look at one thing and go, oh, you know what? I actually look pretty good today. It's going to start changing how you look back at yourself and what things you pick up on.
So, JJ, one of the questions that I ask every guest that comes on the show, the name of the show is What You're Really Hungry For. So I'm curious, what are you really hungry for?
I'm hungry for a bigger community to have these conversations. I'm really hungry for people who want this information and want to keep the conversation going and want to dive in a little bit more. And even though they might be a little unsure about where it's going to go, the curiosity and the desire to feel good, to live well, to love themselves, to be love and to find love everywhere, that's what I long for.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for the message that you're putting out there around love and how we can bring more love in emotionally and physically and mentally. I think it's so important. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
This week is all about learning to be the love that you want to see in the world. So I invite you to choose one of JJ's tips that she discussed during our show and start implementing it in your life today. What one thing can you do to start loving yourself and tending to all of the invisible pieces of your well-being? Don't wait another day or even another hour. Start to become more loving right now. As always, the conversation continues at CynthiaPasquella.com. Head on over and leave a comment below this video telling me one way that you can start being the love you want today. And while you're there, make sure you download today's free menu to track your progress. You'll find inspirational quotes from today's show and a daily checklist that'll keep you on track. It's located right below this video at CynthiaPasquella.com. Did you like this video? If you did, please subscribe. And I'd be ever so grateful if you would share this video with your friends. And if you want to hear more from me, including stuff I only talk about in email, then come on over to cynthiapasquella.com and sign up for my email newsletter so you can start to be a part of this beautiful community of women who are discovering what they are really hungry for. This episode is brought to you by the Institute of Transformational Nutrition. Discover the secrets to becoming a go-to expert in nutrition coaching while making great money on the side or even enjoying a new career at www.transformationalnutrition.com. On next week's episode of What You're Really Hungry For, how does a doctor become 100 pounds overweight?
Good question, Cynthia.
Shouldn't you know better?
You should, but look around it. Many doctors smoke, overeat, don't take care of themselves, but also they're in a mainstream medical model that really isn't about getting healthy. It's just about getting rid of disease or controlling symptoms with drugs.